This is Tech Talk Detroit with Brian Spurgeon and Chuck Lobert. Tech Talk Detroit brings you the latest in tech news and Detroit happenings every week.
Hi, welcome back to Tech Talk Detroit. We're happy to have you with us again. My name is Chuck, and we've got Brian here with us as well. How you doing, Brian?
Good as always, man. Just surviving the winter here and sailing in for another year. Hopefully a different one.
Right, yeah. I feel like I'm barely surviving the winter. I hate the cold weather anymore. But it is what it is. I guess I'm getting through it. But it's been a little while since we've had a podcast, and we apologize for that. Just with getting into the new year, it's been kind of crazy at work with the new office and everything getting in. So we're trying to get back into it now. We apologize for the short hiatus there, but we're back now, and we'll try to keep on a good schedule here this year. So we thought we'd dive right into it today. And we've talked in the past about Microsoft 365. We've talked about the basic settings that you should always have within there, like MFA and different security settings and all of that kind of stuff. What we wanted to touch base on, though, was some of the auxiliary services, some of the add-on services that we always recommend with Microsoft 365 that we feel like really anybody that's using Microsoft 365 really should consider having these different add-on services. And we call them auxiliary or add-on because they're not necessarily provided by Microsoft. There may be options through Microsoft, but a lot of times we'll recommend different third-party programs to kind of that bolt on to the Microsoft 365 suite. And there's reasons behind all of them, so we can kind of talk through that. What services we always recommend, and then we'll talk through why. What the value is of them, and the benefit that you'll see. So we'll get right into that. For starters, one thing that we always recommend, and this is probably one that a lot of people don't really think about because there is the service built into the Microsoft 365 platform, and that's spam filtering. But we always recommend a third-party spam filtering. Brian, when we think about spam filtering, that's usually, I guess, one of the top things that people will ask is, well, doesn't Microsoft have their own built in? And the answer is yes, they do, but why do we recommend a third party? And there's lots of different reasons for that, but why don't you touch base on some of those?
Yeah, I think there's a couple ideas behind it. For one, when it comes to security, you've already got all of your data in Office 365. So I think there's just a general consensus that it is good to differentiate your security posture a bit. So spam filtering is an easy way to just kind of get that other oversight outside of the Microsoft realm, looking at your emails coming in and out. But beyond that, I think while certainly the Microsoft spam filter is better than nothing. If that's what you've got, you absolutely should have that enabled if you don't have a third party. But I do believe there's a lot of benefits to, and there's a lot of different products out there, but going with a third-party spam filter. For one, I think that a lot of other companies are doing it a little better in terms of the usability for end users. Things like a daily held mail report that gets sent out that is a very high level, easy to read email that users get overnight. They can easily look and say, hey, that mail, I was actually expecting that email. That's somebody I deal with all the time. It's easy to click one button, have a ticket fire off, and for us, our help desk gets that request, we validate it, and then we whitelist it. So it's a pretty seamless transition between, hey, that's a real email I'm supposed to get. And then also, you can also just get an easy report to see all the stuff that is getting blocked every day. So I think the usability is a huge benefit. And the Microsoft, they don't have that one-click ability figured out yet. I'm sure down the line they might, but as of today, that's what we're seeing. I think the other big thing though is in terms of using the third party is the amount of flexibility you have over the controls. So a lot of them have a very detailed level of thresholds you can set, and what I mean by that is the sensitivity of the spam filter. So what we find with Microsoft, anytime we've used that spam filter, there's a lot of a lot of tweaking, and the period of learning is a long time, because the measures that we use to track whether or not it's valid or not are very there's only so many in the Microsoft realm. These third-party ones, you can easily turn it up and down on the fly to get that right level pretty quick. So I think the learning curve between the service and your email, and I think is simplified when you go that route.
Yeah, so I think, what we see a bit with the Microsoft built-in one is stuff getting blocked that shouldn't be more often, or stuff getting through that shouldn't be more often. You got to fine tune those settings a bit more than you do generally with the third-party ones that have been doing it forever, and that's kind of all they do. So they specialize in that. So the settings are a little bit easier to use, and right off the bat, they're kind of set really at an optimal standpoint. If you've ever listened to any of our podcasts previously, you know that we're big Microsoft fans. So it's not that we don't buy into their platform or anything like that. It's just that in this particular instance, we do see where the third party just tends to do a better job, from a few different perspectives, like we've talked about. So, that's always one to consider. And, like Brian, like you mentioned, there's lots of different options out there. I mean, if you search for spam filtering, there'll be countless options out there, and a lot of them frankly are good. So, there's not one in particular that we would say is the best one, or one in particular that we would say is the worst one that we know of. But there's a lot of good ones out there, so it's definitely worth looking at. So moving past spam filtering, I think the next one, and again, I think this is one that comes as a surprise to a lot of people, is backup. And when we think about backup, people think, well, obviously I need a backup for my server, I need a backup for my data. What people generally don't think of, though, is that they do need a backup for their Microsoft 365 data. And I think the reason is everybody just assumes, well, Microsoft's backing up my data if I'm in Microsoft 365. And frankly, that's just not true. There's certain thresholds that are in place, certain retention policies that are in place by default, so that your data might be protected for a certain amount of time, but it's very different from a backup. So, for instance, the default retention policy in Microsoft Exchange, and correct me if I'm working off of old data here, but is 30 days. So if I delete something today and 29 days from now, I remember that I deleted it, as long as I haven't emptied out not my deleted items, but I can't even think of the name of it, but
Cycle bin.
My recycle bin, or my recovered deleted items is what I was trying to think of. I can then go back and recover that email. But if it's 31 days, I can't. It's gone forever. There's nothing I can do about it. There's no backup to go to. It's simply gone because I'm beyond that retention policy. So that's where we would recommend a third-party backup solution. And why don't we talk a little bit about, like we're also a Datto partner, and that's the solution that we recommend for Office 365 backup as well, but it goes beyond email, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, this is another one. There's several companies out there providing the service, but I think from our experience, what we've tested, Datto is doing it the best. So that's where, if we're recommending, I would definitely say the Datto solution. But it's backing up all of your Office 365 accounts as it pertains to your email. Also, it's backing up your SharePoint sites and all of the data that you have in SharePoint, which is huge. It's backing up Teams conversations now and Teams data. As companies get more into the Teams realm, we're using that to send a lot more important company data back and forth. So it's good to make sure all that stuff's captured. And then also it's backing up users' OneDrive data. So I think the key is again, Microsoft's great product. Their cloud is amazing. The likelihood of Microsoft going down and your data being lost is, pretty slim. However, what I think what you find is, beyond just backing up your data, there's a lot more use cases for having a solution like that in place. I know for us, especially when you're looking at SharePoint, you have a lot of users collaborating on a document, and yes, you have versioning and stuff turned on in SharePoint, but that's only going to go so far. And what you can find sometimes is, if it's a commonly used document, those versions create pretty quick. So you can kind of override data faster than what you would think. And I think we've had a lot of situations where companies reach out and they're like, hey, can we go back like a month on the spreadsheet? We messed up a field and we were calculating all this data that's been incorrect for the last several weeks. So I think that's where this comes into play. We can easily go back to any point in time since the backup's been started and roll, a single file back, a whole directory. So I think that the ability to have that backup, traditional backup like you would on your file server at your office, it's nice to have those options in the cloud. And then also, I think from a compliancy standpoint, it's good to be able to have backups and archives of all this stuff. And if you're in a situation where you have a let's just say a salesperson at your company that for whatever reason you're going to move on from them, but you're worried about them like taking their clients, taking their data with them, deleting out their mailbox, whatever it may be, right? Trying to make sure that whatever it was that's prompted you to be suspicious of them, that they're not clearing it out. More often than not, employees know when the microscope's on them before you've ever actually engaged them. And that's just, so from this standpoint, it also helps you from that to make sure that your company's data is protected as well. Sometimes employees you can go down this route for 2-3 months before you finally get to a point where you decide to move on. And it's nice to be able to know, to be able to go back and see that you have all of your data collected. So I think that's a couple of very common use cases for this, but totally recommend. I think everybody should have some type of, third-party backup as it pertains to your Office 365 data.
Yeah, and we feel it's necessary, even if the only thing that you've got in Microsoft 365 is your email. But obviously, the more that you have out there, if you're using Teams and OneDrive and you're using SharePoint and so on, the more important it becomes, because the more data you've got out there to worry about. So, yeah, absolutely. Especially like if you think of if you're using SharePoint to host all of your company data, you pretty much have to have. You would never have a server sitting in your office with all of your data on it and not think, well, I got to back that up. But for some reason, when people throw it out to SharePoint, that doesn't cross their mind. And I think it's because they just assume, well, it's at Microsoft Cloud, so it's getting backed up. So I think it's important to know that that's really not the case. I mean, it's kind of, sort of, but really it's not being backed up. So you have to think about that and take care of that on your own. So, moving past backup, the other one that we recommend a lot that we also use internally is the email signature management. And that's really now where you're kind of standardizing all of your signatures across the company. And, that was something that we saw, when we started looking at the signatures as we were emailing kind of back and forth, is everybody had a slightly different signature, either maybe an older version of the logo, or somebody had their title and somebody else didn't, or somebody used their picture and somebody else didn't. Like, there's all different kinds of things. So, of the 20 people that we had in the company at the time, we probably had 5 different versions of the signatures out there. So we went to this platform to be able to standardize our signatures across the board. And then there's other capabilities that you get that go along with it. I mean, obviously you got your branding capabilities, and just kind of having everything standardized. You can tie it right into your Active Directory so that you can pull the data, like job titles and phone numbers and addresses and all of that kind of stuff directly from there. Pull over your users so that you don't have to kind of go through and manually input all of that. So most of them out there, they tie right into Office 365 and are able to pull data among them. And then the other thing is you're able to add that same signature, which, you figure typically if you're using Outlook and you're using, say, a tablet and a phone, you're going to have a different signature when you're on a mobile device, because that's just the way it works. Generally, you're going to have more of a text-based signature when you're sending from your phone versus more of an HTML-based signature when you're sending from Outlook. What's nice about these solutions is it gives you the ability now to, regardless of where you're sending from, have the exact same signature. So if you're sending from a mobile device, it'll just add that signature on as it sends it. If you're sending it from Outlook, it'll add it on as you're typing out your email. You'll still see it just like normal, but you're able to have that same consistency regardless of what kind of device you're using. And then also it gives you some abilities to do some marketing from it as well. You can run different, campaigns, like, some people will run specials or, different things like that, where they can add and set up timed email campaigns or signature campaigns where it'll append different things to their signatures based on when they're sending it. Or, some people might use this for something like a holiday message, or if there's a certain time when the office is going to be closed, or different things like that, that you can just set up in one spot and automatically have it add to all of your signatures. So just a nice platform, nice easy way to kind of standardize everything across the board. It's generally relatively cheap as far as an add-on is concerned. And like I say, it ties right into Office 365, generally very easy to set up. You're able to just tie the two together, pull over all of your users, and pretty much auto deploy it. Generally, probably within an hour's worth of work. It's pretty straightforward. So, that's one that we always recommend as well. Just because it is an easy one to do, and it helps the company from a branding standpoint and from a marketing standpoint. So, I kind of took that one over there, Brian. Sorry. It's kind of the one time I can talk about marketing as opposed to listen to you talk about the technical side of things. So, oh, you're muted, Brian. How used to saying that have we gotten?
I know.
Over
Actually, I had
past
the
year?
double mute. I muted Teams and I muted my microphone. So no, I didn't want to steal your moment. I had to make sure I was piped up for that one. So
It was my once a year.
yeah, I don't want to carry the whole podcast. So we had to kind
Yeah.
of even it out a bit. It's okay.
I appreciate that. So the next one that I thought we'd talk about, and we have talked about this in the past, so we can just kind of touch on it briefly, but it is very important anytime you're talking about Microsoft 365, and that's multi-factor authentication, right? Everybody should have that on, within the Office 365 platform. There's third-party tools as well. So, I mean, really, just kind of to take a step away from what we're talking about right now, which is the Microsoft 365 platform. Really, anything you're doing, if you have the option to turn on multi-factor authentication, whether it's with your bank or anything that you're doing, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but you should always select yes. You should always be doing it regardless of what it is.
Yeah, and I know we've hit this several times on previous podcasts, and that's why I wanted to make sure we hit it again. I feel like this is a point that can never be belabored enough. But ultimately, yeah, multi-factor, two-factor, it's all the same thing. They call it different things, different places, but you should have it anywhere where it's an option. You should have that turned on. It's one of the biggest ways to be alerted when there is potential activity going on any of your accounts. Anytime you get that notification of, hey, here's your, 6-digit code, or did you do this, that should tell you right then and there's something wrong. And if you think about it, without that feature enabled, at that point in time, you've already been hacked, because the only way they're getting to that point is if they already have your password. So that's where to me, it's just, you can't preach it enough. Like you said, especially financial institutions, you should have it enabled, but also from your business, especially as well. Your end users are always your biggest risk in a company, and that's because of things like spam emails and all this other stuff we're talking about. But the second one user gets exploited, that's now it's like going to sleep and leaving your back door open. So that's really the key to it is stopping it. Because even if your user account does get compromised and they have your password, that two-factor is that last lifeline to make sure they can't get in. And without that enabled, your account's already been compromised. So, and more often than not, you're compromised. We've talked about it though, but you're talking 2-3 months sometimes that people are sitting in your business and you have no clue about it. So I think, yeah, no doubt. You should have that on. And also, admittingly, as annoying as it is to have to do two-factor all the time, especially with like the financial institution stuff, they've got the biometric now. I know for me, for a lot of the apps, I can just use my fingerprint, and that's awesome because it's no big deal. But beyond that, that's where the Microsoft product has a bit of an edge over some of the other ones in terms of just having a little bit of control with doing conditional policies. It's a little easier to do it when it's in that Microsoft umbrella. But you can do things like, any requests coming from within the IP address of my business. We know that anybody in this building, you have to get into here securely. So anything coming from inside of here typically is going to be a trusted method. So you can do things like bypassing two-factor in a situation like that if you want to kind of limit the impact, where anything coming from any IP outside of your business is then forced to do two-factor. So there's a good compromise you can do without it being too overbearing at times, but also maintaining that level of security. But yeah, I think that's an absolute, no matter what, just like spam filter, this is just as important.
Yeah, I was going to say too, yes, it is annoying. I hate when I go to Amazon and it wants me to enter in the two-factor authentication to be able to go in and buy whatever it is I'm looking at. So I get it, but what's more annoying is having to go through and cancel all your credit cards and change over your debit cards and all of that kind of stuff because you didn't do it. So it's totally as annoying as it is. It's a must.
I even have two-factor turned on my app that generates the two-factor codes. So that's how serious I take it,
Yep.
I mean, it is what it is. I've learned to accept it and maybe take it a little further, but.
Do you have a lock to get to the lock on your door too?
No, door's open.
So yeah, the last one that we wanted to touch base on is ATP, Advanced Threat Protection. And I'll let you run with that one, Brian. I know a little bit about it, but you're the expert there, as much as I hate to say it.
For sure. I mean, I don't want to get too into the weeds because with this product, it's very easy to do that, as with almost any security product. But ultimately, the Advanced Threat Protection, it provides a bit of an overlap with spam filtering, which in this situation is a great thing. Sometimes, if you have overlap and certain security applications, antivirus, things like that, they kind of can conflict. But in this situation, I think it's nothing but beneficial. So ultimately, what that's going to do is kind of give you a, AI machine learning element to your email and how data comes in. So it's very used to how your patterns of use are in Office 365. So when it starts to see activity that's outside of that norm, you can do things like flagging accounts as potential risk factors, which would then trigger a workflow for somebody to go and approve or validate. But also it gives you a lot of like sandboxing features, which is ultimately, if an email's coming in from company ABC and they've got a unique Excel attachment on it that maybe has some embedded macros that may or may not be good. It might be coming from a domain you deal with all the time. So spam filter is looking at it as this is approved. What the ATP is going to do then is take that document, unpackage it, run some simulations to see what is this coding in the background really going to do. And if ultimately it finds that it's of malicious intent, it's going to quarantine off that email. So that's an email where in a situation, even with the spam filter, you may have gotten that. If that file that was attached wasn't a known bad file, that spam filter picks up on. So I think what it does, it just gives you that extra layer of security that's leveraging, like, again, it's like that machine learning AI type technology that we all hear about. This is it, in place, acting on behalf of your email account. So that's really one of the main benefits of it. But the data that you get back from it, the insight that you get as an administrator is unbelievable. From a user, you really don't see it, really know it's a thing. But from the administrator standpoint, you can see exactly where accounts are being targeted from, throughout the world. So, let's just say from the Ukraine or something, you're noticing an uptick in attacks from there. That's going to trigger you to make a policy to block all activity from Ukraine if you don't do any business with a country like that. So I think that's what it does, is it kind of gives you the data as an administrator as well to make smart decisions to help, bolster your security.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, another great tool, and really it should be kind of a basic add-on for any Microsoft 365. But we appreciate you taking the time to listen today, and we look forward to we'll be back again. We'll try to keep on a good schedule this year, and we'll look forward to talking to you again.
Interact with Tech Talk Detroit at techtalkdetroit.com or on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.